Hi everyone, you're listening to SciByte, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly science podcast. We recorded this one live on February 13th for release on February 15th. This episode is brought to you by GOGcom. Save 10% when you buy 2 or more games in the month of February. My name is Chris, and joining us, like every single week, is your host, Heather. Hey there, Heather.
Hello there, Chris.
Hey there, Heather. Happy science to you.
Happy science.
Now, we're doing this one, it's all askew, folks. I gotta be honest with you, because it's Monday.
Yes.
And the science typically on Jupiter Broadcasting happens on Tuesdays, but the thing is Jupiter Broadcasting is completely aware of all types of science, and we wanted to make sure that we observed the relationship type science, and so we moved our live day for this week only, so that way we could make room for Valentine's Day. And now, Heather, I want to tell you, I got emails from people saying, is it moved forever? No.
Oh, no, just this week.
Yeah. So you want to tell people what we have coming up this week?
Sure. We have a Rockin Roller coaster of a show.
Oh, okay, great.
Okay. We're going to take a look at sub-glacial lakes, updates on Alzheimer's, balloons, Arsenic Life, the future of NASA's space exploration program, spacecraft updates, viewer feedback, and take a peek back into history.
All right. Yeah, okay, so now the gauntlet has been tossed to Angela. She has to work in Rockin Roller Coaster to the faux show, and then it's passed to Alan for Thursday on TechSnap.
I heard that on last on Sunday, and I was like, I'm writing that in the show doc right now.
You're sticking to it, huh? Well,
that's
good on
gonna be
you.
Hilarious.
Brian will be a happy boy. I'll have to make sure he listens to this one. All right. Well, what do you say? Since we've got a ton of show to go into, and we got a lot of great stuff to talk about, why don't we jump right into the news? What's our first story this week?
Sub-glacial lakes.
Say what?
These are lakes underneath the ice sheet of Antarctica.
That's like a place where like dinosaurs would get frozen, right? That's kind of what that is.
Well, it's a place where people can get frozen. Lots of things are frozen because the water is frozen.
Wow. How does that happen? So what's the story here?
Okay, so this isn't like brand new. These have been thought about being able to happen for a while now. The Russian geographer thought that they might be able to happen. The idea was first put forward by a Russian Prince Pyotr Kropotkin. But in 1994, Russia and British scientists got sonar and satellite imaging that revealed the largest undisclosed freshwater reservoir underneath. So they were able to get sonar, and they just see, all the nice bumpy parts of the ice, and then just see a nice flat area. So that was a lake under the ice sheet. Now, you might think, water underneath ice. Yeah, pretty sure it's going to be ice.
Right, yeah, because if it's ice above it, it must be even colder down below.
Yeah. The weird thing is, ice is a great insulator as well. I've seen this in some of my experiments at work. You have a bucket full of ice, and run a tube down through it. It's supposed to cool it, just a condenser. But occasionally, if you don't watch it, the ice can sort of melt and refreeze around the tube. And I've seen it so it's like a 1/2-inch diameter around the tube. But the water inside is really hot.
Man, friggin' water, man. How does it work? I tell you.
Yeah, so ice can be a insulator too. So what happens is all this ice is sort of pushing down on this little area. You've got thermal heat coming up. You've got a nice insulative sheet of ice, as hot as it sounds, above. So there's all these actually rivers and small lakes and stuff all happening underneath the Antarctic sheet.
It's incredible.
So one of these lakes, the largest, is about 160 miles long and 30 miles wide. It's about the size of Lake Ontario. These aren't like just teeny tiny little lakes. Some of them are quite substantial. There are about 400 of these lakes, but Lake Vostok is the largest.
Wow.
So, they've been pretty much separated from everything else for millions of years. It's just layer of ice and these little water reservoirs.
So then the water must be in a pretty pure state, or a non-polluted state maybe would be the better way to put that? Is that theoretically possible?
Yeah, that's what a lot of the theories say, is that's it could be like super pure water. Now, some Russian scientists say that the quantity of oxygen in there even exceeds certain parts of the planet by 10 or 20 times.
Whoa, really?
So
because it got smashed down there, kind of compressed down. It's like bubbling water.
Yeah, bubbling water.
Right.
Yeah. Well, in the deep oceans or in certain locations, there's very low oxygen levels. It's kind of weird combinations. So all of these things come together. And there have been efforts to drill down to these. Now, some people said, we really shouldn't dig down to these. We'll contaminate them. Worries about that. Now, there's a couple of different teams drilling down to these. One is a Russian team. They're about 800 miles southeast of the South Pole, about the center of the continent. Surface temperature is about minus 126 degrees Fahrenheit. Ooh. They're over 11,000 feet high. I mean, this isn't just sea level. This is 11,000 feet over sea level. And all these drilling teams have a very limited window to work in every North American winter, which is sort of the Antarctic summer. So you have a very limited window. You go in, you do what you can, you pack everything up, and you say, bye, see you in so many months. And then you all run out to the airplane and try to go home.
Go warm up.
Yeah, before, it's too cold for things to come get you.
Those are very harsh conditions to do science under.
Yes.
Those are brave people.
Not friendly conditions. Well, the Russian team was using... it's drilling through ice. This is not just drilling through the ice in your drink. This is really compact, really dense ice. So drilling through it is actually very hard, like drilling through rock.
It reminds me of that scientifically accurate movie starring Bruce Willis, where they go up on an asteroid. I don't know if you're familiar with this movie, Heather. And,
I may have heard of it.
Oh, yeah. And they do some drilling on this asteroid, using mostly science, and they have to deal with different drill issues as well.
Yeah. You get that certain tone in your voice, and I was like, it kind of reminds me of, I'm like, I know where he's going with this. I know exactly where he's going with this. The roadmap has been pulled out, been laid out on the dashboard.
You're right.
You've got the funny smirk on your face, and you're driving off the road.
We don't even have to be in video for you to pick that up, huh?
Nope. I can sense the smirk through the internet.
I couldn't help it. I apologize.
It's okay. Well, there's obviously a lot of problems drilling, not on a very scientifically accurate meteor or asteroid, but on this very dense ice. So the Russian team is actually using about 60 metric tons of lubricants and antifreeze to drill. And so there were a lot of the opposition saying, yeah, that's going to contaminate the lake that's been
that's
separated.
The exact first thing I thought is, isn't as soon as the drill bit once it hit the water, won't it just dump all that kind of crap into the water?
Was worried about that because this is super pristine water that has been separated from the environment for millions of years, and you have all this lubricants and antifreeze sitting above it. Yeah. But what the Russians were saying is that this water in this lake was be pressurized, so that as soon as you poked a hole in it, just like if you shaken a pop can up and you poked a hole in the side, it would spray out. So what they were saying it would do is they'd get close and they'd stop and they'd draw a teeny tiny little drill bit into the water, and then it would rush back up, and they'd be able to see, they have, essentially a little tiny vertical lake of fluids and antifreeze in there. And once they start seeing it come back up, they immediately stop and pull up back the drill bit, because then they know that water has started coming back up.
Okay.
And so they pull it back, because the theory is it'll come back, it'll start coming out, and then the glacial ice all around it would freeze it.
Okay.
So it would sort of spill out and then get frozen in place like a plug.
Boy, that seems like a gamble, though.
That's why there was a lot of opposition to it. Now, they did have to go through an international approval committee, this group of international scientific community that says, yes, you can do that. No, you can't do that. You can go here at this time. And so they'd waited a few years to get approval for this. And they did finally get approval. They had enough evidence that showed they were trying to do it the best way they could, get it, trying to really hard to do it the right way to avoid contamination.
Mm-hmm.
So they're there, about 800 miles southeast of the South Pole. Surface conditions are balmy. negative 126 degrees Fahrenheit, about 11,000 feet over sea level. It's something you don't really think about. It's Antarctica.
Right.
It's the Antarctic, and it's ice, but it's actually not like at sea level. It goes up quite a ways. So you're up at a high altitude, just a tiny bit cold, and they've actually been drilling this hole for about 2 decades.
Oh, okay. So this is a serious project they're working on.
Yeah, well, like I said, this is really hard ice. This is really dense ice. And, so they kind of have an idea of like, we think there's something here. So they start drilling, and you only get a window of opportunity every, Antarctic summer, but North American winter.
Right, yeah.
So you have a limited window of opportunity that you can go here. So you rush in, you do what you can, you winterize everything, you throw your stuff in your bag, and you hop on the last flight out of Dodge.
Bring your warm jammies with you.
Yeah. So last year, they got fairly close. Just about 30 meters shy, about 90 feet or so. So they came pretty close, but then at the last minute, the sleep alarm was going off. They had to go. So they throw all their stuff in. They throw all their stuff in, and they just have to leave. They're like, okay, it's either finish this and stick here for the whole winter, for us find little scientist popsicles next time they come around, or leave. Geez. So they decided that they'd finish it this year. Now, as the season was closing this year, there were some reports that other teams had lost total communication with them. That's like, we can't contact them anymore. And in these kind of conditions, you don't really want to get an answering machine.
Right, yeah. I mean,
you want somebody to pick up.
That could be critical.
Yeah, very critical, and not that good. But they finally did hear from him. The news was coming out that they'd hit the lake. They'd hit it, and they were drilling down to it, and they saw all the kerosene and antifreeze come back out of the hole. And so they stopped, and it was just like they had predicted.
That's good. So it turned out good.
Yeah, so it turned out good. Now, since it is the very last bit of the season, they pretty much had to go, hooray, we did it. All right, now pack everything up. Throw tarps, throw everything in your bag, get everything winterized, and come back, and we'll see about more science next year.
Wow. So they're going to go back. I guess they just keep on doing it, just like they've been doing it for a decade.
Yeah. So they had about 50 cubic feet of all this kerosene and freon come back up. So they're pretty sure there's going to be almost that amount of water that came up in the hole and froze it. So it also kind of plugs the contamination out of the lake, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the way down, they have seen various microbes and stuff of various natures.
Oh, life? Nothing?
Tiny, squirmy floaties in the water life.
It's life, Heather, but not as we know it.
No, not as we know it. Actually, one of them was definitely not as we know it.
Oh, yeah?
They were not able to categorize one of the things. They were able to say, this is this kind of bacterium. This is that kind of thing. This is life, not as we know it. Put you over there.
Really? In the need to find out more about category?
Yeah, need to find out more, and haven't really seen anything like it, or it's really strange from the norm.
Interesting. That sounds very sciencey.
Yes. So next year they hope to come back. So they'll come back. They hope to see that, like they've seen, like I was saying, they've seen before. They've seen these heat-loving microorganisms. So these kind of things that you can see in geothermal vents in the deep ocean. So it's possible that one of those lives at the bottom of this lake. And so that may be part of what's able to keep it liquid. So one of the interesting things is, if we drill here and we find some sort of life, it's similar enough conditions to Jupiter's satellite Europa, the ice moon. It's got the sheet of ice on top, and it's got oceans underneath it, oceans of salt water. So if this can harbor some sort of floaties in the water life, it's certainly possible that Europa can too.
Totally. Wouldn't that mean it's possible? But it could be that water would have been seeded by that ocean vent, so the life forms getting there were sort of that would be the Europa's handicap, right? Because the ocean isn't. There's not. Well, of course, who knows? I mean, I guess. Yeah. But if it's possible, the cool thing is, I mean, way far out there, crazy way far out there. But could you imagine we get to a point in our development where we could go out to Europa and find the locations that can support the kind of lives that we know and plant them there? And would we?
The would we is an interesting part. For terraforming Mars, there's a lot of people that say, we should terraform Mars to make it, like a second Earth, do what we can to get it as habitable as we can. And then there is a group of scientists who say, no, you can't do that. You have to preserve the environment as it is. So it's kind of a give and take everywhere.
I think we would do it.
Now, my guess is yes, because the majority of the scientific community says, if we can terraform Mars, we're so doing that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and maybe to future uses, it would seem just like it did to previous uses of going across a nation and spreading out, or conquering a new island or something like that, because they'll just become islands in our backyard, hopefully.
Yeah.
Without air and freezing cold.
Well, yeah, we wouldn't necessarily inhabit Europa.
Maybe I'm down to party on Europa. I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, you'll have ice for your drinks. I'm thinking maybe it's just going to be like the 7-Eleven on my way out of the solar system. Be like, hey,
totally.
Who wants water? Last try.
That's totally that's what Europa is. Go. Totally, isn't it? It's the last stop for water in the solar system before you really take off.
Yep. That last 7-Eleven, everybody, this is the last pit stop. I'm serious.
If you need to go to the bathroom, you got to go at Europa.
Yep. This is it. Last chance.
I can only hope. We could only be so lucky.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All right. Well, so that's interesting. Any other thoughts on that story?
Well, it's just next year they'll be able to go back, like I say, and drill in. They're not the only team. There's American and British team, drilling other separate, different one of these sub-glacial lakes. And so it's just kind of interesting how far we're getting every year. And now that we've gotten down to one of the lakes, once we get once we get a core sample of that ice, what all will it say, and how confused will we be, and whether millions of other questions will come up from our answers.
And how long until I can order a case of it on Amazon Prime?
They've already there's an international committee has already stated that they cannot sell it.
Oh, good. Well, I mean, yeah, I think, yeah. But yeah. It should be precious.
Yeah, that was one of the early things that they did. They're like, yeah, nobody's allowed to sell this. Scientific purposes only.
Good.
Ask permission.
Maybe it's like, yeah, gosh, that'd be interesting. Oh boy, well, keep us updated, okay? Let us know what happens. Yeah. All right. Well then, I won't hold us up anymore because I'm really excited. I'm gonna take a break here. SciByte has a new sponsor. Actually, we have a sponsor for the entire network this week, and it is, nice. And I am so excited about this sponsor too because it is GOGcom,
nice.
Which is an awesome sponsor. Like, they're the perfect company to talk about on Jupiter Broadcasting. So I'm really glad to have them on. And look, the thing I want to tell you about is they're doing something really kind of fantastic for the month of February. Now, they already have great prices. I mean, that's honestly one of the things that I love about them is they have very fair pricing. We're talking about, $5.99 or $9.99 for these games. Dozens of them work on Mac or Linux.
Wow.
A lot of them use DOSBox, which I've talked about before and I absolutely love. In fact, I did a whole in-depth look on it and had Brian join me. But the thing they're doing for the month of February is this 10% off when you buy 2 or more games. 10% off, you can get like 2 games and it's only still like $14, and these games are epically awesome. I mean, they're the kind of games that go back to the core of what makes video games great. I've had so much energy for these classic games recently, and I reached out to GOG.com and they totally got it. They totally get me. Their prices are completely fair. They've got a great selection. In fact, I'm going to give 2 different picks that I'll recommend to the SciByte audience. Heather, have you ever played Roller Coaster Tycoon?
Yes.
You have? Okay, great.
Oh my gosh.
I love this game, and it is a total. You think really roller coasters? You think roller coasters really? But it is actually a blast.
Yes, like you have to keep your little people happy, and you have to like lay out things just right. And you're like, I need to.
Well, and you can get kind of designy too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and try to have the better looking entertainment park, and you want to have a well organized entertainment park. That way, the customers flow appropriately. That's important.
There's a lot of math that comes up on that. You're like, there is. It's like you have this many customers going this way. You have to look at the flow of the customers and how things are laid out, and how to unlock all the spacey parts.
Oh yeah, and you got to make some tough choices at times too. So, and you know what? Over at GOG.com. $5.99. No DRM. Wow. You get, I know, right? Also, another great pick probably for the SciByte audience is the Incredible Machine, and they have the Mega Pack over at GOG.com. Ooh. And this is sort of like, is it Ruth Goldberg? Is that?
Yeah, Goldberg.
Build the craziest machines you could ever imagine using this thing.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. Great game. Classic. $9.99 over at GOG.com, and if you bought those two games together, you get 10% off your order, and you get to keep them forever. You don't have to worry about an activation code. Also, something that GOG.com just throws in with your purchase is the manual, but also for both of these picks, the soundtrack too. So you get, you get the whole soundtrack too, which is a ton of fun. You can make ringtones out of it, and of course, I didn't say that. I didn't say it, but I'm just saying you could.
Yeah.
So thanks to GOG.com for their awesome support of SciByte and for their support of the entire Jupiter Broadcasting Network for the week. If you're a Jupiter Broadcasting fan and you love our content, go over to GOG.com, check out their games, buy some of their titles. It's a great synergy between these two companies, and I think it'd be really awesome if you guys showed them a little Jupiter Broadcasting welcome. So thanks to GOG.com. All right, Heather, well, with all of that out of the way, it's time for the SciByte News Bite! That's pretty epic.
That is.
All right, what's our first story in the News Bite today?
All right. In general, today, there just happened to be a lot of news that was updates on stuff we've done before.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and the first story is a story that both Chris and I know we watch these kind of things very closely. It's another step toward against Alzheimer's.
Oh, awesome. Yes, we both yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. Us, like many people in our audience and in the world, have family members who've been affected by this, and the whole family is affected by that. But last time we talked about how there's been a link between these certain kinds of things, the amyloid beta proteins. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, science people in that community.
Don't hurt science, Heather.
I know, I hurt the pronunciation science all the time.
Yeah, look at me. Who am I to say anything, right?
Yeah, it's okay. But there's cholesterol carriers that, there's these things that sit on the brain and they kind of clog up everything. And there are cholesterol carriers that can kind of sweep it up. They're the scrubbing bubbles.
Oh, really?
And people with Alzheimer's have low of those type of proteins. And so last time we saw that they were trying to inject certain liver proteins that could help decrease that. And over a couple of weeks, the mice were much happier. But there is a new drug that's actually been used to treat T-cell lymphoma, cancer.
Cancer, yeah.
Yeah, and it's been used for more than a decade for that. And what they found was that the betroxetine, this drug, acts by stimulating certain receptors, the retinoid X receptors, RXR, which controls how much of the... Oh my gosh, there's so many of these long names.
I know, right? They should give they need to take tips from the tech industry where they came up with really great little acronyms and little cutesy names, so it was just easier, like Core i7.
So what it's doing is it's able to trigger some of those APOE, these cholesterol carriers that help sweep out these amyloid beta proteins. Sweep out the proteins from the brain. And so what they're able to do is this cancer drug acts by stimulating receptors, which control how much of those proteins are produced and how it kind of reprograms the brain immune system to sort of eat the protein deposits on the brain that are causing such problems.
Wow.
And actually, they were really surprised by the speed at which it improved, at which it had a difference in memory deficits and behavior.
So they were doing this on mice?
Yeah, so they had little mice, and they had with these proteins on it, so they're, Alzheimer's ridden, essentially, brain. And they give them the treatment, and hours after the treatment, the levels had dropped by 25%. Within a day, within hours. Within a day, it was dropped by half.
Wow.
And within 72 hours, after about 2 weeks, it was down to 75%.
That's incredible.
And the effects could last as long as 3 days without any other treatment.
Huh.
So what they do is they'd have, they're able to kind of test this by multiple ways. We talked last time about how smell was these proteins sit on the cell receptors
right, I
first.
recall. Mm-hmm.
So what they're able to do is, have the mice, and they'd put some powerful smell out, and the mice would go like, ah, and they wouldn't be appreciative of that. And the ones who had the Alzheimer's brain would sort of get used to it, and then they'd ignore it. They wouldn't be able to identify it anymore.
Oh,
and so, and the other thing they did was they put, soft tissue in in the container with the mice, and normal mice go over like, ooh, soft, tear this up into a gajillion pieces and make a bed. And so they tear it all up and make their little nest. And the Alzheimer's mice would just kind of stare at it. What's that for? I don't know.
Huh.
So they'd be very confused about what they were supposed to do with it.
Yeah.
And after this drug, they were able to, the mice suddenly remembered what to do with the tissue paper. They could make nests.
Wow.
They could, but it's kind of interesting because what I was reading sideways through it, to me, now probably not science, I'm probably destroying the science here, but to me it was almost saying, is it these proteins just like clogging everything up? You often think of Alzheimer's as,
misfiring or going to
misfiring or lost forever.
Yeah.
It's lost and lost forever.
Oh, yeah. Once something's gone, it's always gone. Yeah.
Yeah, once it's gone, it's indelible ink is lost. And so I almost wondered if this indicated that for at least some things, it wasn't indelible ink was lost. It was there was whiteout over it, and if you could get the whiteout over it, there's still stuff underneath.
Like white noise almost. And then if you could clear out the white noise, if you could destatic the tube kind of a thing.
Yeah. Destatic the signal, then maybe you could get some, maybe it would still be there, maybe not 100%, but could you get closer? And so the next step, of course, is, seeing if it acts the same way in humans. But the interesting and the great thing is with this is that since it's a drug that has already been approved by the FDA for over a decade,
right?
They have the safety and they have the side effect profiles. They know exactly what it is. They could probably they will be able to move into human trials much quicker than some newly designed drug would be able to.
Yeah, that's definitely encouraging. Yeah, I actually just recall hearing something about, funny enough, about the use of Viagra for a completely non-ED related function, and they are able to sort of fast track it because it's already gone through a lot of the required testing and whatnot, so they are comfortable kind of saying, okay, well, we know it's at least safe in humans.
Yeah. I mean, originally, Viagra was discovered because they were using it to treat some sort of blood pressure, I believe, disorder, where it was trying to increase blood flow or trying to protect the blood, the vessel walls. And then, on the little side effects checkbox, certain people started checking certain things. And they're like, I bet we could use that for that. So then, it kind of came out to that. So a lot of these are type of things where as you check out a drug, what are all the side effects? And very rarely and occasionally, they're actually positives, or it's something like this where nobody may have noticed it, but they were looking at it and they're like, whoa, this is actually doing this. This is an FDA approved drug that is doing this. And it's clearing all these proteins out rather quickly.
Oh, that'd be cool. I mean, if my grandmother could have taken a pill every 3 days or every day, I mean, I know she would have done that. I know she would.
Oh
have done
yeah.
that. I
Well, I mean,
sometimes
even if you think about it, these kind of things, even if it wasn't a cure, if it was a slowdown, if it was a take this, I mean, if it was like
a reduction of symptoms.
like diabetes, you take your shots, you give your insulin shots, and it doesn't always work 110%, but it works a great deal. Or can it slow it down significantly? Any of those type of things.
I get a little bummed because I would like to hear that they have like a switch that they can flip in in your DNA that just makes it go away. I don't want to have to take a pill, but I obviously would totally take one if it would clear up the symptoms. I just love to have like a permanent fix for this kind of stuff, but I know that's way out there. That's way out there.
There are genetic factors that are risk factors. So, so I mean, if they do, they can, test your blood and you're like, hey, you're at risk. So maybe if you have, I don't know, to me, it seems like, for us or other people, if it's been in your family, could you go in, have this blood test and say, yeah, you are susceptible. And so now maybe you're on high alert. Like I need to be super aware of this.
Right, and maybe if there was some way to sort of scan your, how did they get the? Did they have to kill the mice to get the images of their brains like that? Because if you could just go into a scanner and be like, yeah, well, you have 70% white noise, you better get on this pill.
One of the images that you pulled up earlier was they could kind of see. Now I don't off the top of my head know whether that was a slide. I know generally with a lot of these they do kind of brain slide some of these mice.
Right.
But I believe last time we talked about how they were able to start seeing it on the brain, because that's how they were able to start seeing. I'm not sure, but they can see some deposits. The more accurate our imaging processing is, maybe they can start seeing this on your brain.
Yeah, because wouldn't that be a great, also aside, medication aside, if there was just some sort of brain scan they could do to determine if you're having this issue?
Yeah. So, is it a slowdown drug? And, well, okay, it's a slowdown drug. Well, the earlier you catch it, the better you are. I mean, one of the major things I used to hear, I don't know if it's true, is that most people with Alzheimer's live with it for 5 to 10 years before it's really apparent.
That was definitely true in my grandma's case, yeah.
Yeah, it was the same for us. It was like, what's, grandma forgetting her glasses on her head and being silly.
Yeah.
And, oh no, I took a wrong turn and I ended up in a strange part of town. And when is it become more serious?
Right. Yeah. And sometimes, by the time you realize what's really going on, the process is pretty underway.
Yeah.
Well, maybe if nothing else, maybe this will prove to be a big breakthrough on that. I would like so. I would hope so.
Yeah, that's one of the big hopes. And if nothing else, all these are proving what kind of effects go into it. So maybe with scanning and with blood tests, genetic tests and stuff, they can say, you're very likely to have this. You're starting to look like you have the effects. We need to start doing some sort of treatment now.
Right. It could definitely be another process, and it could maybe be another thing in the diagnosis process. I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know what I think. It's time for Balloons in Space! I love that title.
I know. I had fun writing it.
How can balloons work in space? Don't they have to float in air? I don't get it.
Okay. Remember a week or two ago we had the 2 Canadian teens who put their little Lego man into space?
Yes, that was very cool.
It was using a weather balloon. So it was the, high atmosphere, not necessarily space, but high atmosphere. I say in air quotes.
Right. That kind of the blurry line between space and Earth. Yeah,
so it's shy of what, kind of is the international standard for sort of space. But
they were kind of faking it. It's okay.
Yeah, they were getting close, and
kids.
So they're two teenagers who got pretty close.
Closer than I've ever got.
Now, what I didn't know was they were inspired to do this by a photography experiment by a pair of MIT students who were, had this weather balloon, and they put a camera up and they went up and they were able to take picture of the stratosphere with the digital camera. They went for a while and they're like, wow, that's cool. We should try that. We should totally try that and put a little Lego man on there.
Cool.
Now what has happened is MIT, when they send out their acceptance letters, puts them in this special tube, apparently. And they say, find creative ways to open it or do whatever you want with it. One student said, I want to fly it to near space and have pictures taken.
Awesome. That student is my favorite.
Yeah. And it was really interesting because, she really did a lot of this. She was a ham operator.
Oh,
She'd done,
awesome.
So she'd done this kind of balloon work before. So she knew what she was doing. And the video you might have just seen, there's a giant balloon and there's the guys with their hands up and they're actually holding gloves. I know this because I've played this game before.
Oh yeah, why do you have to hold? See, is there a reason? Do your oils ruin it or something?
Well, yeah, the oils in your hands can affect the balloon just slightly, and at high atmosphere, when it's expanded to 20 feet, it can make it slightly more possible to pop there.
Oh,
So you can weaken it just slightly, even just the slightest amount at high atmosphere is not so good.
Yeah, that's got to be a bummer for the first dozen or so people that had to find that one out the hard way.
Yeah.
You set it all the way up there. There's no way for you to know.
Yeah, and you have to hold it because no matter what you do, there's going to be wind.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, you don't want it to fall into the grass and pop right there, and then your day's over.
Yeah, right.
But so she, had been working on balloon experience before, ham operating experience. So she put her stuff on a balloon. Had used local weather reports and radar information and tracked it out and said, I believe it's going to follow this flight path and land here.
How exciting. So on the visual version that we put out that goes along with this, they're driving down the street and she's got the laptop in her lap and they're looking out the sky roof tracking the balloon.
Yeah.
Oh, if this girl, maybe she might be the type to listen to SciByte. She probably falls in that demo. You gotta get in touch with us and come on the show and tell us about this.
Yeah, if you listen, you're totally allowed to be like a guest star.
Yeah, this is so cool. Look how that.
She got pretty close, and it didn't really travel that far. It only went about 75 miles.
You can really see the curvature of the Earth, though.
Oh yeah, some of it I don't know how much is lens curvature.
Yeah.
But you get up and then you can see the curvature of the Earth. And if you get motion sickness, don't watch the video.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I had to kind of skip through it. I'm like,
I'm just staring at it. I can't help it. It's like watching a flame.
Oh yeah, it's crazy how high it gets. And then you can definitely tell it pops at one point, and then it goes down and it has a little parachute. And she's able to track it, and you can kind of see they have two cameras, one on the tube, one that they're kind of holding. And at the end, you see the tube. They'll kind of split shot together. And so the little tube is kind of floating down, and you see a forest, and then you see the trees, and then it's caught in a tree and just kind of sitting there. And in the meantime, they're switching to the family, which is walking around in the woods, looking through the trees.
What
and then they look up
thing.
And they point up, and it's up in a tree that they use a stick to knock it out.
Could regular old mortals do this? I mean, is this something that Dylan and I could do in 10 years from now?
Well, goes back to some of what we said before, is how long are they going to let people just do these?
Right. Oh, yeah. Eventually, you got to figure they're going to start regulating and cracking down,
yeah.
Right?
But honestly, with GPS-enabled phones, we've thought if we had another, tracking a balloon experiment that we'd have to track, that we almost kind of sat down together and we're like, okay, buy the phone off the store shelf, charge it up with a couple of cards, turn on the GPS tracking, tell it to email its location to this email, and just start tracking it via Google Maps or something. So you smack it on there, put a little warmer on there, release it.
Yeah, totally.
And then, it calls home.
In fact,
and
there's a little app that I use called Glimpse that that gives you real-time location. Like you can be driving down the street and it sends people on an overlay of Google Maps where you're at.
Yeah, so you could use that kind of a thing, it's not necessarily like an actual, you buy your good phone, but it's one of those phones that you don't pick up off the.
Or if you get like a used one, maybe you upgrade. I know this isn't a problem. This isn't a concept you might be familiar with, but Heather, some of us already have multiple smartphones. We've already purchased multiples. We just have them sitting around the house.
Oh, okay. Well, the theory is sometimes with these you lose them and they're gone.
Yeah.
For all time, for a tractor to run over, or a deer to stomp on.
A deer? Would I?
Man, I'm out here in Colorado. When the balloon lands out in the northeast Colorado, that is farmland.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. You don't know where it's coming down at.
We don't know where it's coming down at. We found one a year later because, you stick your phone number the company phone number all over it. We have a farmer call up. Yeah, we hit it with my combine. Come get it if you want it.
Wow. Well, maybe I'm being a little science dumb here, but how did this girl know that this thing was going to land like in her neck of the woods and not in the next state over?
Well, what you can do is you can use, there's a lot of weather radar, weather data, radar information, wind information, so you can track. Now, the wind will go in different directions at various levels of the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So you have, the jet stream goes one way. And it'll be that way for 6 months of the year or whatever, and then it turns around and goes the other way. So you can track. You're like, all right, I know the winds are going east at 20 miles an hour here. So let's see, project it. Goes up. It's going to travel this long through that part of the atmosphere. Then it's traveling, 10 miles to the south and it'll go through that layer of the atmosphere for so long. And so you can use math and use your map and track it out.
In fact, she shows where she had a predicted path and then the actual path, and she didn't do too bad.
No, she didn't.
That's great. We'll have a link to the full video in the show notes if you guys want to watch that. That was a really awesome one.
Yeah, and it includes quick time of her soldering everything together and putting everything together and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. Now we have a note in here about arsenic life forms. This is something we've talked about before, haven't we?
Yes. This is one of those times where I was like, when did we talk about this on SciByte? Last time on SciByte, I was like, no, actually this last time on Jupiter at night.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yes. So it was the one where they found microbes in a lake here on Earth that they said that lived on arsenic.
Right, that was a big deal.
Yeah, it was, totally different type of life form. It's instead of phosphorus, which we think is required, it was using arsenic. It's like sort of like life forms saying instead of replacing carbon with silicon, silicon-based life. So they were trying to duplicate those findings and not doing so well.
No, really.
Yeah, one problem the original team had was they didn't do certain experiments. What you can do is you can attach radioactive tags to the arsenic, and then as the microbes take it in, you can kind of see where exactly it ends up. Does it, you can test the DNA of that microbe, and then be like, here it is on the DNA strand right here.
Radioactive microbes attached to arsenic. Man, when science
radioactive arsenic in the DNA of microbes.
Wow, when science rocks, it really rocks hard. I mean, that's a party. That's what that is.
It is radioactive shine.
But they ended up. The result was a little bit of experiment fail.
Yeah, there was no evidence that it was actually requiring the arsenic to live. No evidence that it actually incorporated it into its DNA. Now, the new team says, yeah, it can deal with a lot more arsenic than, it's more tolerable, far more tolerable here than any other, it's not having any serious effects.
Right, and so they definitely say it's tolerant, okay.
Oh yeah, it's definitely tolerant to arsenic, which is something in itself. But it wasn't really, there were some questions about the purity too. The new team said, I think your samples could have been contaminated by a little bit of phosphate.
Maybe a little arsenic got in there accidentally.
Well, no, they were testing arsenic, but it was other things that that got added accidentally, maybe, because this new team, they said that they were testing it with just arsenic and it wasn't doing a lot and it wasn't doing a lot. They're like, all right, let's spike it with a little bit of phosphate, the friendly stuff to life.
See what we get.
And then it started having the growth rates that the original team had put out. So it's kind of, for the most of the scientific community, it's kind of put to sleep.
It's kind of a done deal. The book's kind of closed on that one.
It's kind of a done deal.
Yeah.
The original researcher, who has a blog that talks about all her scientific research.
Mm-hmm. Well, she's got a blog.
Well, yeah, but she's not commenting on it, and she won't officially comment on it until the official paper from this new scientific community study comes out and it's published, and then she can take a serious look at it. And she's also going back and she's saying, no, my original paper didn't actually say it incorporated it into its DNA. Others are just jumping to this conclusion. So
there's a little dispute.
There's a little dispute, and sometimes, you can science up the words. Be like, no, actually, I said this, and it's kind of like that. So you can kind of really tweak the words to say specific things.
The wording kind of can be vague a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, you can have it a little bit vague, or you can say one thing and somebody might take it as another.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. What are you gonna do? Hopefully, it all gets settled in a very scientifically sound way. And now she can come and she can react. She can bring her analysis. She can hand over her stuff. She could try it again. I mean, it's not done, but it's until she comes back with something solid, I think people are just gonna move on.
Yeah, until she's able to refute the new evidence to a specific degree, then it may look like it's done for now.
Right. All right. Well, something else that actually looks like it might be not done, but slowing down. In fact, we gotta hit. We have a special sound drop just for this type of moment, and I don't get to bust it out too often, but this one definitely qualifies. This is not good. Tell me that the future of space is in question.
Yeah. Well, the future of NASA space.
Well, space travel. Yeah. Future of space exploration. For us.
For NASA. I do kind of identify NASA specifically because we have listeners all over the world.
True.
So,
absolutely true.
So NASA has the James Webb Space Telescope. And it's the follow-up to Hubble. It's not really going to be visual. It's going to be very scientific data information. Not going to have the pretty pictures that Hubble has. But it's going to be a lot of information and good information for a specific part of the scientific community. Now, because it's kind of skyrocketing costs, and because, as most people know, there's a lot of government cuts going on, NASA's getting a good chunk of cuts too.
Oh.
And they're kind of in a push to definitely keep this one project that is getting more and more expensive. So they're having to cut the Mars program and other science missions, and they're just being gutted.
No.
Yeah.
Do you get so frustrated with just watching this happen over and over again, watching programs get cut before they have a chance?
Oh, sometimes, yes. The only approved U.S. missions to Mars now, besides Curiosity, which is on its way, is another orbiter that's blasting off in 2013. And there are no cameras on that at all. So, as of right now, Curiosity is our last rover for a long time.
That's so depressing because it's like when you have a situation where you feel like, regardless of what the current climate of the country is, or the economy, or whatever it is as long as we're doing these kinds of things where we're reaching forward, we're sort of building, this is so corny that I'm about to say this, we're sort of building a bridge to the future. And, we really are, you can't ever get, you can't ever move off this planet if something ever happens to it. And it's the only planet we got if we don't attempt to move forward. And if we just sit here and stagnate, I don't know what are we dreaming for in the future as a collective society, and all of us.
Yeah. And another thing that some people bring up is never underestimate the new and exciting information, or just that the fact that there's an astronaut program, or these other type of things to make kids go, wow, I want to do that. And maybe they don't go into science. Maybe they don't go into space science. But, maybe they find out that they like programming better, or computers, or anything. But it gets them into math and science. So it inspires a lot. It can inspire a lot of kids to do certain things. Now, this actually reaches beyond NASA and beyond the U.S. because NASA teams up with a lot of other countries to do things. Now the day we filmed this, Monday, is they were putting out some official numbers. These are all based on, all the information I have on right now is based upon what I kind of saw coming, what a lot of people kind of guessed, what was going to happen. But the rumor was that NASA had already notified the European Space Agency that we weren't going to be able to provide funding to do launches, that we were going to work together in 2016 and 2018. There were some Mars probes that were going to look for life on Mars, one that was going to bring a soil sample from Mars back. So we kind of backed out of that. So now the European Space Agency, I believe they've invited Russia. They said, hey, our dance partner totally dropped us. Want to come? So they're kind of hoping to get a replacement for the American pullout. So it's not really that sudden. For some people, it's that sudden. But I mean, my company has contract work, small business contract work with NASA, and there were a lot less projects provided this year.
It's kind of
this time around, and they said, well, that's because we did all the funding up front and this and that. And we're like, why would you do all the funding up front? We don't get that. You've never done that before. And then the rumor mill starts moving, and we're like, oh, you're not going to get as much money, are you?
You're running out of money, yeah.
Yep, running out of money and running out of time. And there are certain things that, either the political scheme or certain aspects of say, you cannot cut this project. You must stay with this and you must stay with that. And if you must stay with those, no matter how expensive they get, everything else has to get cut.
And what are do you know what some of the examples of projects that just absolutely cannot be cut, and so everything else has to be sacrificed?
Right now, the Space Webb telescope, like I was saying before, it's this new telescope that's going up, and it really is, its costs just keep getting bigger, and it keeps getting pushed back, and it just keeps getting complicated. And so the Mars program and the planetary exploration programs are getting cut. It's one of those things that, if you have a bill that you're not allowed to cut, you have to keep this going. And it gets bigger. Okay, so maybe your cable bill has to go down. You have to cut down to the basic cable. Maybe you have to cut down the smartphone plan to not so smart. Everything else has to come down or get canceled. Cheese Bacon says it's even more expensive to put a team back together, though. There are those fears when the shuttle program shut down. There was a lot of equipment. There were a lot of things in place, and a lot of people in place that knew what to do, that had the tools to do it. And when the program got completely shut down, they walk across the street to the unemployment line. Everything gets, collects dust, and now you suddenly lost these groups of people that know what they're doing. You lose all this stuff to keep things rolling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now there are obviously programs that we already have going. We have, Curiosity. We have, the one going out to Pluto. And so there are these teams that they're not going to just pull the switch and just, you have, a probe that you've spent all this money on just flying out into the wild blue yonder or wild black yonder. So you'll have these things where you're definitely have to stick with the specific teams. Or specific programs have to continue. So Opportunity, the other rover on Mars, they're going to keep going as long as they can.
That's good.
in some sort of reduced capacity of whatever Opportunity can do. So these certain programs that you continue doing, you continue watching your probes, and
the frustrating thing for me though about all of this is that you have it here in the show notes. NASA represents 0.5% of the federal budget.
Yep.
So it's almost like it's at some level it's just cutting for cutting's sake.
Yeah, there is that. I mean,
like it's almost like it's like sacrificial cutting, so that way they can say they've just slashed the dollar amount. Because I mean, when you're talking 0.5%, I mean they spend that. That's just crazy. That's nothing.
Yeah, I mean, you see the numbers like they've cut $300 million or all these hundreds of millions of dollars from the budget, and you're like, wow, they still have that much money. That's a lot. But on the other hand, it's still not a lot. There are still a lot of programs a lot of people's paychecks being paid, a lot of programs going forward, a lot of things being built. And I mean, really only, like you said, like in the show notes, it only represents 0.5% of the total budget. And it's not just affecting us, it's affecting all the other space programs around the world.
And future generations.
Yeah. I mean, there are definitely people who say, there's someone in the community when they were talking about cutting all these type of programs. When they were talking about, I don't recall, but they were talking about cutting all these Mars programs.
Mm-hmm.
And, everyone was saying, he's like, whoa, how can you be cutting this? This is crazy. And all these politicians are like, oh, no, we're not cutting that. Obviously, we're not cutting that. We have to stick with that. And the scientist was like, you know what, if I had said, why are you cutting this? And they're like, yeah, everyone's getting cut. We don't have the money. We're really sorry, but we don't have the money. There's a lot of cuts going around. But they didn't say that. Some of these things are, you're like, every community, or a lot of any government-funded community knows there's cuts going around. You can, the global economy is what the global economy is. As little pieces of it, you can only do so much. And if there's cuts going on, there's cuts going on.
Yeah.
But sometimes, and then there is well, why are you cutting this? There are a lot of places to cut. We have our little slice of our pie. Why are you taking bites out of our little slice of the pie?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We only have so much.
I know, it's a frustrating thing. And I think we can all think of different things that they could stop spending money on instead.
Well,
we all have lists, I'm sure, and it's I guess it is what it is, but it's just really disappointing.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where people in the know have seen it coming, but you kind of you hope not, and then it kind of gets bigger and bigger. One of the kind of interesting things that NASA did was they do these tweet ups where they actually invite members of the tweet community to come view this launch or view that launch if you're local or nearby. And so they had this contest, and it's like, come to our press briefing about our official budget numbers and tweet what you want when you want in the conference.
Interesting. Pretty brave, really.
Yeah. So their theory is the information is the information. Have all these tweeters tweet, and then you have the information go out. Does it change anything? Does it not change anything?
It bypasses the media, which is interesting.
Yeah, you bypass the media. You go straight to the people and you say, here's what it is. And you get the information dispersed rather quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to go. Especially when the media sometimes undercovers NASA appropriately. It lets people like us get the reports directly. Yeah.
I mean, oftentimes with these, in these niche communities, I call NASA a niche community. But the major media will only highlights and covers things when things go terribly awry.
Or really, really right. Like like the rovers are landing.
Yeah. Like, wow, little green men are waving to our rover.
But otherwise, they follow the old, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of their motto. I don't really like their traditional media. Heather, it turns out the whole reason Jupiter Broadcasting is around is because I happen to think they're a bunch of D-bags.
Oh, Chris.
I'm just saying. That's one of the things this show works on a lot is covering stuff and covering it from an angle that traditional media doesn't, and following up on stories that often just get forgot about when they do get covered up on, or when they do get covered.
Mm-hmm.
So,
a lot of this show is going back. It was funny because I was going through all the news information, and it was like the third story I hit that I was like, I think I've read this again before. I was like, okay, this week is just going to be all updates on previous stories.
One thing before we go on to the next story is you have a note in here that Ed Wheeler says he's quitting NASA over the cuts to the Mars program. Is he somebody that I should recognize the name on?
He was one of the big players. He's been with NASA for decades and decades. So and it was funny because it was one day is all sunshine and lollipops, and then some information about the budget stuff came through, and the next day it was, it was empty desk and him walking out with cardboard box. Oh, yeah, table flip and cardboard boxes.
Well, I mean, yeah, and hey, you got to make a statement. All right, well then, are you ready to move on?
Yeah.
Okay, then it is time for the spacecraft update. Let me reprogram the SciByte computer and point it up to the sky here. Oh my goodness! All right, here we go. Oh. There we go. There you go. Okay, so now
we're ready to look at spacecraft.
We're now in spacecraft alignment, Heather. Proceed as you wish.
Okay. So this is another Curiosity rover update. Now it's not so much it's doing something awesome, but sometimes they kind of release this information where there's all this stuff packed in this rover and are these probes, and then every once in a while you'll find out something about it. This one is, there's about a smartphone size plaque on the end of one of the robotic arms, and it's used for like an eye chart. So it'll have specific colors and little lines to say this is how far this is the color, so you can kind of see how things are looking, see the colors, what the camera sees in colors, and kind of balance everything. Because really, the rovers send back black and white pictures. Shh, don't tell anyone.
Oh.
And they add in the red.
I think I did hear that. I remember thinking, well, how do they know they're doing it right?
Yeah. So some of it is just artistic eye, and some of it is, they have these color strips, and they go, okay, this is red, this is blue, this is green. Filter that backwards through the camera, kind of back process everything, reverse engineer it, and say, okay, this is pretty accurate to what it is. And then they can kind of tweak it if they so desire.
Why can't they send a color camera, Heather? I mean, really, do you know why they can't send a stupid color camera? There
are so many bytes of information. Okay, here's what it is. Black and white goes so much faster. They can get all sorts of other data coming back. You have to be smart with your power.
So they are using when they send the picture, they're also sending other data that they need bandwidth for.
Well, yeah, there's bandwidth, but it's also, you have so many watts of power.
Right.
And it's going to take you this many watts to send a color picture, and less if you send black and white.
That's incredible. It really comes down to that, huh?
Well, yeah, a lot of it is. And, how quickly can you get the pictures? But what's interesting about this specific eye chart is that there is a coin on there. Now, not just, any old coin, but a 1 cent, a US 1 cent penny. And it's from the first year Lincoln pennies were minted. It's from 1909.
That's cool.
Well, it's not just something they bought on the budget. It was one of the team members bought it on his own money.
Oh, jeez.
Bought it on his own dime, stuck it in there, and said, "This is awesome.
Yeah,
we're gonna send this to Mars."
Well, and think about how much a penny like that says. This is stupid, Chris being stupid, but like when the future aliens land on Mars, and because we never were motivated enough to get off our own planet, we're long gone. We're totally extinct. But they want to find out about us, and they find us on Earth, and they're like, oh, it's too bad they couldn't get their S together. And then they're leaving, and they're like, hey, what's this? Was something flashing down there on Mars? They land on Mars. They could get a lot about us. They'd figure out how we look. They'd figure out that we must have some sort of time system based on the year on there. And they'd get a few of our words, too, including one of our deities. There's God on that thing. I mean, think about the amount of information that penny will tell future aliens about us.
Hey, see a penny, pick it up. Even works for aliens.
That's right. A penny earned is a penny, or something. A penny saved is a penny earned.
Yep.
Yeah. And they'll think Abe Lincoln, because like the chat room says, they won't understand. They'll think Abe Lincoln was that God.
That's fun.
Yeah. That's interesting. Okay.
There are things like this where it's, and sometimes it's just because the scientists don't say anything. So sometimes they don't say anything until later, or sometimes it's like this where they just kind of release the information later.
Somebody must have known. I mean, there's no way something like that doesn't get on there and people don't know about it.
Well, yeah, that's obviously known. But one of the Spirit and Opportunity, some of their pieces were made in New York. And this is right before, right after 9/11. And so some of the, there were some people who, were nearby, who kind of dealt with it nearby. And they had some, they're like, okay, what are we going to, we want to do something. And so they wrote over to one of the, the politicians in New York and said, hey, if there's anything you can do, we'll see what we can do with it. And so they deliver some pieces of metal from the trade towers. They say, here. And so they shaped them into covers for parts of the sample. And then they, so they do this as a rush job. They ship it off, and they don't tell anybody. And then after the rovers land on Mars, it kind of gets out that that's what they did.
Oh, yeah.
So that they'd taken parts of this, and they'd made covers, and they'd shipped it off, and it'd gone to Mars. So there are some times that, something simple necessarily doesn't get said until later. And there are things like this where, people buy something on their own dime.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool.
Or, yeah.
I like that one. All right. Well, any other thoughts on that one?
No, it's just, and then sometimes, you get signatures on there, and they blast off into space.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like, what was isn't there a golden record that they put on the
Voyagers?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's cool.
It's got speaking every different language and sounds.
And like the sounds of Carl Sagan's wife's body or something like that. Like didn't they hook her up to instrumentation and get the sounds of her body or something?
I don't know if they did heart sounds and stuff. I don't know.
I don't know either, but you know what I do know? It's time for some viewer feedback.
All
right, so I see a note in here that this is 6 myths that everyone believes about space, thanks to movies.
Yes. Some of these viewer feedbacks are people that send me and say, look at this article.
Right.
This time it was, Angela from Jupiter Broadcasting over on the Faux Show.
Yeah, my wife.
Yeah, you may know her.
What is she doing?
She sent me the link to this article, and I thought it was hilarious and great, and something that people don't always realize.
Yeah, I bet there's a lot of really bad myths about space because of movies.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, first one. Yeah. Asteroid belts are deadly.
Yeah.
Your hero has to fly and dodge and weave and be careful not to hit that rock.
And drill.
And drill.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
in reality, not so much.
Oh, but come on. That's where all the excitement is.
Yeah. They're not packed together. The odds of, they send probes through the asteroid belt.
Yeah, that's true.
Anything Jupiter and on, they have to send their probes through. And they kind of calculate that the chance of one of their probes hitting an asteroid, less than 1 in a billion.
So, like all of these scenes we've seen in Star Wars or Star Trek or in Tor, where you go up and do space combat, and there's these massively clustered together belts.
Yeah, that you're weaving and spinning around on. Yeah. No, not really so much.
Oh, that's so boring.
Yeah.
What about what about in the ring of a planet, huh?
Yeah. Maybe. Okay. They've gone through Saturn rings, I believe, and they were kind of worried about that. they were worried about what they would, how they would get through it, or would it be okay? And the probe going onto Pluto, they're kind of worried about how much they see all these 4 moons and how much other stuff is there. What's there going to be, around it? Is there going to be enough stuff to hit the spacecraft?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, even if you imagine another solar system, maybe it's not like ours, because, we've kind of noticed that ours is not the norm.
Mm-hmm.
But if they had a really densely packed asteroid belt, say for some reason, it won't stay that way. If you have all these things together, then they're going to hit each other, going to smash each other, and they're going to start flinging off. And the way gravitational orbits work, it'll kind of start stripping itself. It'll start kind of going through it.
All right.
Metal Freak has a good point in the chat room. This is from cracked.com. And I actually went through and I checked out some of the sources, so
yeah,
just to be double sure.
Right. Yeah, and link in the show notes too.
Yep, links in the show notes and all sorts of good information there.
Mm-hmm.
Next one.
Yeah.
Black holes are cosmic vacuum cleaners.
And also time travel machines.
Yep, they eat planets, they time travel, they try to eat everything in the universe. Not so much.
I buy it. Oh, really? Aww.
No. Okay, just so everyone knows. Take our sun. Pretend it got swapped out for a black hole with the same mass as our sun.
Okay.
We're going to orbit just fine. The only thing that changes is we get colder.
So it's the same gravity as our sun?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the mass and gravity are mass is mass.
Right.
If it's the mass of the sun, then it can't exert any additional gravitational force.
All right.
Than the sun.
All right.
So
I'm jiving with your science.
I mean, it's a hole that things go into, but it can't provide any additional gravitational forces pulling in. And that can't necessarily, need a planet or free. Yeah.
I always thought like a black holes were was holding the entire Milky Way galaxy together. To be honest with you, I thought there was I thought there was a black hole at the center of our galaxy, and that maybe
the Milky Way. There are supermassive black holes in the center of galaxies. These are super massive.
So they really
and there are lots of them.
Yeah.
So
they're big.
They have a lot of gravitational pull, and they can pull things to them. I mean, if you put a black hole with the mass of 10 suns, if you replace the sun with something the mass of 10 suns, then yeah, we're going to fall. We're going to fall into that.
Yeah. Now this next one... go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, this next one, you're about to crush my dreams here. The sun is not yellow.
Get your crayons, draw the sun, hope to grab yellow or you're going to fail kindergarten. Not so much.
Oh, everything I know is wrong.
I know, the science is broken. And on a Monday, how can the science...
My whole week's thrown off now. I'm going to look up at the sky all week long and know that thing is a liar.
Yep. Okay, so the sun is really hot. It's 6,000 Kelvin. It has to be burning white.
White hot.
Yes, white hot. It's the Earth's atmosphere. Just like the blue sky is blue, they always talk, it's bending light from the atmosphere. That's kind of what makes, yellow crayons keep in business.
It's kind of boring, to be honest with you. All right, well, the next one is meteorites are hot. Like burning hot, like ball of flames.
Yes. Watch out. Hewling ball of flame, huge trail of smoke behind, heading for insert location here.
Right.
Not so much.
That's boring.
In space is cold. Space is very cold.
Makes sense.
So they've been sitting really cold, just over about 3 Kelvin for billions and billions of years.
So when you see trails, you're seeing ice trails. You're not seeing smoke trails, people.
When they come in?
Oh yeah, when they come into the atmosphere, then you're seeing smoke, sure.
No.
No, that's not smoke when they're rolling, when they're just rocking through the atmosphere, they're about to smash into a building.
That's not.
Perhaps I need to remind you back to a movie starring Bruce Willis.
You can remind me all you want. That's not going to change the science.
Oh, okay.
The science will not cry.
You need to see this movie. It does a lot of stuff up, Heather.
I may have seen that science.
Okay.
That wasn't my kind of science.
So if they're not burning up hot, what are they?
So, really, when they land, they're about lukewarm.
They're lukewarm, huh?
Yeah.
How boring. They're not freezing cold. They're not hot. They're just lukewarm.
Yeah. Now, granted, when they're coming through the atmosphere, they do get heated up. But it's not necessarily the rock. It's what happens is they're going through the atmosphere. So they're pushing through the atmosphere so quickly that they're compressing the air in front of it and pushing it out of the way. It heats the air around it, in front of it, so much that the air actually catches on fire. So that's the little light that you're seeing. And that provides the heat to the meteor and kind of melts it down to generally the core, iron core. Yeah. And so that's what kind of breaks it down to that. And then it lands in the field and the farmer goes over and digs it up or picks it up picks up Superman, or somebody with a metal detector goes around and searches for it and digs it up. They're like, hooray!
All right, this next rumor, I hope you actually are busting for me, and it is that people explode in the vacuum of space.
Yes, in space, no one can hear you scream or explode, or your eyes won't pop. Your eyes will definitely pop out.
Is that true?
No.
Good.
Yes, skin does its job. It protects you. It keeps you all in, even in space.
I like that because I like the idea, like, if I ever need to jump between two different spaceships, that if I have to just, like, blow all the air out of myself and just, and then just take a big leap, I can survive 20 seconds traversing between these two ships as I go to save the princess.
Of course, you go to save the princess.
Right.
I'm not sure how many seconds you have. Your blood won't boil immediately. It will continue to try to pump until space, absorbs all of your body heat, or enough of it that your blood starts to freeze. It's breathing that's the real issue. It is, you said, blow all the air out of your lungs. Mm-hmm. It's lung trauma. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of a lung trauma that deep sea divers can get into. It's all that kind of pressure. Granted, you stay out long, you're not going to have a picnic out in space. You're still going to die. It just won't be as exciting and movie-proof as movies try to say.
Well, this next rumor is sort of the inspiration for an album title and also the plot behind a new movie involving Nazis coming to a theater soon, and that is there is a permanent dark side of the moon. Is that true?
Nope.
There are no dark... What's going on, Pink Floyd? They got it all wrong.
Well, no permanent dark side of the moon.
So there was always... Yeah, of course.
I mean, Earth has a lit side and a non-lit side. Right. Same thing with the moon, but it's not permanently dark. All the sides of the moon get light and get dark. Maybe the poles get less or more. There are some craters that don't get light, but I mean, it's tidally locked with the Earth, so only one face faces us. Right. We only see one side of the moon, but the other side could be partially lit. I mean, when you see, the moon, a crescent moon, it's not just the sun selectively shining on that little section of the moon. That's the only part of the moon we see. Mm-hmm. It's the whole other side is still lit. I mean, think when a solar eclipse happens. The moon gets in the way of the sun. We still see the same side of the moon. Sun is blaring on the other side of the moon.
Right.
Kind of has to.
Yeah.
It's bathed in the light of the sun and keeping it from hitting us.
Man, I think you just destroyed the entire plot of that new movie. Uh-oh.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, movies don't always make science happy.
What do you think? Should we jump into the science calendar?
Yeah.
All right, well, come on over here. Get in the time machine. Are you ready?
Okay.
Let's do this thing.
Right.
Here we go, folks. We're going back in time.
Oh,
no. There we go. Yeah, okay. I got the new seats installed in here. You like that?
I like it.
Much more comfortable. All right, well, the first destination is 89 years ago, February 16th, 1923.
Tutankhamun says, hello, world.
Oh.
We've talked about this before, how they got to the steps of Tutankhamun's tomb. It was this week that the archaeologist Howard Carter opened the sealed doorway to Tutankhamun's tomb in Egypt. And there were a couple of visitors there. There was Lord Carnarvon, aristocratic Englishman who'd funded the expedition. Later, the Queen of the Belgians, other visitors came. Essentially, all they were able to do is sort of peek a little camera or something into the corner that they'd pried open. And that's when the whole famous "Yes, wonderful things" quote came from. He's like, what are they? Yes, wonderful things. When they breached the tomb and peered inside.
Okay, well, there you go.
I mean, it was from the last November that they'd actually, found the door. So it was from November to February that they took from.
Oh, yeah.
Found the door to actually peering inside.
Wow, quite the process. All right, well, let's go to 59 years ago, February 21st, 1953.
Yes, DNA. Francis Crick and James Watson reached their conclusion about the double helix structure of DNA. They first made their announcement in a paper, a structure for, I'm sorry, science. Okay, my Monday science can't even pronounce that.
We could just we could just leave it in the show notes. I mean, it's really...
Yeah, it's there in the show notes. Yeah. We'll call it DNA.
Yeah, it's much easier. Deoxyriboose?
Deoxyribose.
We're making somebody cry right now.
Yeah, we're making some science cry.
The chat room's got our back, though, so I love it.
Okay.
You know what I'll do? I'll paste it in the chat room so the folks in the chat room can analyze it while we talk about it.
Okay. So that's when they made a conclusion about the double helix. They said, this is what DNA looks like. It's the double helix, and that's what's in all our museums and all our little textbooks and such.
Yeah, very cool. Okay. All right, well, the next one goes back 35 years ago, February 18th, 1977.
Yes. Had to put this one in. Enterprise is taken on a test drive.
This is such a cool and iconic picture too, because it's the it's the Enterprise where it's strapped on the back of that big I guess I don't know, it's a Boeing something, right?
Yeah, it's 747 jumbo jet. Yeah. This week was they tested it for 2 hours in the inert captive mode, which is essentially still hooked up, no engines, no people. They just kind of had the scientific instruments hooked onto there and kind of saw how it was. Eventually they would fly it up and they would sort of pop it free, take the 747 out from underneath it, and they had some astronauts in there, and they kind of landed. There are no engines or anything. That's why you can see the big white cone at the back. Yeah. So it's just sort of proving that it could land like a glider. So they did all these tests, and then they had it, and they had the little astronauts in there, and they rode up on the 747, and the 747 just sort of pops them free, says, here you go, piggyback time over, drops out and flies away.
Now glide down to safety.
Now glide down.
That's cool.
Now, and of course, a lot of people might know that it was originally named the Constitution to honor the bicentennial, an old aircraft or an old ship.
It's also the model of the USS Enterprise, or of the original series Enterprise.
Yeah. Now, what happened? There was a huge writing campaign by fans of the Star Trek series to the White House.
Yep.
And they said, okay, we're going to name it Enterprise.
Out of all of the things we could pull our weight around, that's one of them. That's kind of cool that this first space shuttle was named Enterprise.
You can rename a space shuttle. Yeah. If it will keep the people happy, Chris.
Well, maybe the people could write in letters about that NASA funding, and maybe we could get a campaign going about that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying, Heather?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Well, I think that just about brings us to the end of this week's episode, doesn't it?
I think so.
Wow, big science episode this week.
Big science, and on a Monday.
Yeah. So, and thanks to GOGcom for sponsoring SciByte, and I encourage everybody to go over there and check them out. And of course, SciByte will be back at our regular time, Tuesday nights at 7:30 Pacific over at jblive.tv, and then released Wednesday morning. Heather, great show.
Great show.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next week.